Hi, everyone. This is Paul Casey, the KKHOF Hall of Fame educational video series. Today is a very special day. We are celebrating the 70th birthday of Senior Master of the Arts, Frank R. Trejo. You'll hear some stories from some of his friends. You'll see some photographs, and we will share our warm wishes as we remember Frank on December the 24th, 2022. I hope you enjoy this. Please watch as we celebrate a birthday. Happy birthday, Frank.
It's funny, I tell people all the time, I can remember like yesterday, the day Frank walked into Pasadena school asking about lessons. That stands out clear as a bell. But there's lots of other times and stories that, I don't know if he'd want told. I told some of them at the honor thing that you did for him when we first did it, about some of the hell raising and funny stories that went on back in the old days. Frank was quite a hell raiser. He got off on doing all that stuff. I can remember one time we were in Austin, Texas at one of Brian Duffy's camps, and we went club hopping, and Willie Nelson's daughter Lana was with us, and we were having a good time. But we were at a table, and Frank kept getting drinks put in front of him, shots of booze or tequila, whiskey, whatever. And he said somebody was sending them to us, but I didn't know. But Frank was doing that, and he was trying to get me drunk. So I can hold my own with a lot of these guys, especially with Frank. And Frank got where almost it did pass out. Matter of fact, and they had to carry him out of the place, and I was fine. But then I found out the next day that Frank was the one doing that, and it backfired on him. So that's just it's hard to say how you feel about somebody like that. I want to say I want to wish you a happy birthday, a very happy birthday, and Merry Christmas.
Paul, how you doing today? Okay, well, it's an honor to speak about our mutual friend, Frank Trejo. I remember Frank telling me how he got interested in Kempo karate, which is very interesting. He said he was answering an ad that was in a newspaper that said karate instructors needed, no experience necessary. And he says, I can do that. So that was his introduction to Ed Parker. And I don't know exactly the year it was, early 70s, I guess. I do not know, but he shared that with me. And then when I was talking to my cousin, Lincoln Conti, the other day about Frank, and you can't talk about Frank as long as Lincoln and I and you have known Frank, which is now probably 45, 50 years. There's all kinds of stories to share about Frank. Some are good, some not so good, and a lot of them in between. But Lincoln was in Pasadena working out on the mat. And at that time, Steve Herring was the manager, and he was talking to Frank Trejo. This guy comes in the front door, and he's belligerent. Obviously, he was stoned on something. We found out later what it was. And he says, "Where's Larry Tatum? I'm here to kick his butt." And Steve Herring stands and he says, "Look, Larry's not here. Can I help you?" And he says, "Yeah, you'll do." And he starts fighting with Steve Herring. And they're kind of duking it out on the mat. And Frank grabs one of the fighting sticks off the wall and hits the guy behind the knees as Steve's punching him in the face. And at that time, the guy decided he had enough, and he goes running out the front door. So somebody calls the police. By the time the police roll in, the guy's on the sidewalk in front of the dojo in Pasadena doing push-ups. So we found out later he's on, what is it, PSP? Yeah. So when I was in the police academy, 1975, the instructors were saying, if someone's loaded on this drug, you can't choke them out. They will fight until they die. They feel no pain whatsoever. So I never forgot that. So that's kind of one of those stories that Lincoln was sharing with me. And then I remember my black belt test was actually, Lincoln and I tested for black belt 1974 in Pasadena. In the back row going for the brown belt was Frank Trejo and Larry Tatum. And so we went through the whole test. Ed Parker was running it. We did all of our basics, all the techniques, all of our katas, and it was time to kumite. And so Ed Parker said, well, who would you like to spar with in the front row, Frank? Take your pick. So before he answered that, I reflected on 2 years before that, 1972, Tom Kelly and I had just won the California State Karate Championship. I was a heavyweight brown belt. I weighed 215. Tom Kelly was a heavyweight black belt, and he weighed 315, 100 pounds bigger than me. So we had a photograph taken, Tom and I together. In front of us was the 4-foot-high championship trophies. And someone took a picture of that. And Frank Trejo saw that picture 2 years before we were at this testing in 1974. So when Ed Parker says, who do you want to spar with, Frank? And he looked at me and he looked down the rest of the line in the front, looked back at me and he said, anybody but Autry. So I took that as a compliment from Frank Trejo, because anybody that knows Frank, he would fight with anybody. But this was him going to brown belt. So he had not totally perfected his fighting game yet, although he was a boxer before he got into the martial arts, which we all know about that. And so anybody that has known Frank for any length of time, there's all kinds of stories that we can share, but I know there's a time limit on this or I'd be here all day talking about Frank Trejo. But another thing I want to talk about is the last time I saw Frank. Now, we all know that he was suffering from diabetes and he was in the hospital, and I went to see him, and we were laughing and carrying on and sharing the stories, that good stories, bad stories, and some in between, and a lot I wouldn't share on any kind of recording for sure. But so after my visiting time was about up, and I reached down to hug him, as I always did. I put my hands around him and I just started to hug him, and I literally picked him up off the bed. He was a lot lighter for all the reasons we know, but I picked him up and he started laughing, and he said, Jack, put me down. I said, all right, what do you say, Frank? And he said, Jack, please put me down. So I put him down on the bed. We're laughing uncontrollably. And I said, Frank, do you remember a long time ago, I used to be bigger than you, and then you got bigger than me? And guess what? Now I'm bigger than you again. So we were laughing. I mean, I'm telling you. So that was the last time I saw Frank, but it was such a good feeling. That's what I want to remember, not the funeral and all that other stuff. I want to remember him and I laughing uncontrollably, shared so many good stories together. So when you think about it, Paul, think about all the guys that have gone on before us. Ed Parker, Elvis Presley, Steve LeBounty, Tom Kelly, Steve Herring, Frank Trejo. There must be a very large dojo in the sky somewhere. So with that, I want to tell all my brothers, save me a place, because I'll be there one day for sure. Sorry. Anyway, I can't wait to see those guys again. And I know I will, as you will. And so with that, with my emotions intact, I will say, thanks for the time, Paul. I appreciate everything you're doing for Frank. He affected so many people in so many ways. Like Ed Parker affected me, I know Frank Trejo affected you, and so many people like you love this guy forever. So Anyway, so thanks for the time. I hope that was entertaining or enlightening or educational to somebody out there. So thanks again, my friend. God bless everybody. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. Frank Trejo, I, Jack Autry, want to wish you a very happy birthday. I can't wait to see you again, my friend. God bless you. We will be together again one day, for sure. Amen.
Greetings and salutations. My name is Casey Jones, and I'm with the BKF. I met Frank Trejo in the early 70s. It was during a karate tournament. After I completed my first round, Frank pulled me to the side and offered me some strategies, some tricks and tips for my next rounds. And it turned out to be very successful, and I was grateful for his help. I maintained connection with Frank, and he shared more science with me and tricks and tips to the tournament circuit. Frank was also a loving and caring individual who really meant a lot to me in the sense of he was honest and he was just a honorable person. I'm not going to say happy birthday to Frank because I think it's kind of odd to say happy birthday to someone who's gone. But I will say thank you, Frank, for the memories, for your spirit, for your kind heart. Thank you so much for being who you are. And to all I say, Merry Christmas, Happy Holiday, Happy Kwanzaa, Feliz Navidad. Peace and one love.
Hi, I'm Dennis Conatser, great friend of Frank Trejo's, friend for many decades. Traveled with him to Australia and all over the country here. What a great, wonderful individual. This coming up, the 24th this year, would be Frank's 70th birthday. Happy birthday in heaven, Frank. We've had a wonderful time together, traveling on the way to Australia, having fun surfing with the sharks. You talked me into that. I'll never forget that. But what a wonderful person. Great competitor, wonderful coach, great personality, great sense of humor, great teacher. Frank, we miss you. I miss you. Until we meet again, happy birthday, Frank.
Hi, my name is Zachary Carter, a personal student and friend of Frank Trejo. I met him in the early 90s with one of my instructors at the time, Louis Solis, an old Pasadena Montebello student. And I started training with him from then on personally. Used to fly him out to Vegas, and/or I trained in Pasadena with him quite regularly. I want people to know how big of a heart Frank had. He loved kids. We had a program called Creative Physical Fitness, where we used Kempo as a form of therapy to help mentally challenged children and abused children. And I remember the first time we went to a school to teach, the physical education instructor used to have these kids walking around in cones and stuff. You should have seen their body language. They were very depressed, very unhappy. So he tells the kids, listen, we're going to work out, and these are guys going to teach you some karate today. And they were kind of like, boo, we don't want to work out. So Frank steps up, salutes everybody, as Frank does, and said, we're going to be the Karate Kid today. Who all wants to join me? Everybody jumped up, started cheering. Within a couple minutes, Frank had them in an attention stance and had them ready to start the class. So we worked them out for about 30 or 40 minutes, working basics, using drills to help with their center line and their balance and everything, things that they need to work on. By the end of the class, these kids were sweating, but not one of them didn't have a big giant smile on their face. Now again, we started with 15 kids and this was the first week. The next week, we had 35 kids. The next week after that, we had 50 kids. Everybody wanted to join in. The point of this is Frank had a big heart. He loved kids. He would melt with them being around. He loved working with them. To him, it wasn't work. It was fun. It was play. That's what I know about Frank Trejo. He was an amazing man, had an amazing sense of humor, loved practical jokes, but didn't like it when you got one over on him. So in a day of remembrance of Frank, please enjoy this story and remember him the way I do. Such a loving, kind-hearted man that was a Kempo warrior, but a soft, loving, gentle soul at heart. Thank you, Mr. Trejo. I love you. Happy birthday.
All right, on behalf of the Basic Combatives Integrated Group here in Seattle, Washington, Miss Christie and myself wanted to wish our dearly departed but never forgotten Grandmaster Frank Trejo a Merry Christmas and a happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Frank. Miss you, love you. Rest in peace.
Hi, Ted Sumner here in Austin, Texas. At Christmas time, we often reminisce about friends and loved ones who are no longer with us. And on this particular occasion, I want to wish a happy birthday to one of those. In the world of show business, when you mention Frank, there's no question you're referring to the chairman of the board, Frank Sinatra. But in Kempo, when you mention Frank, likewise, everyone knows you're referring to the great Frank Trejo. Frank was one of Ed Parker's best students. Not only a great fighter, great martial artist, but a great instructor. I always caution martial artists who strive for greatness that is not found in being necessarily a great fighter, but in being a great instructor. That will be your legacy. That's what people will remember you by. Frank, I remember specifically watching a demonstration he was doing with several others and Mr. Parker. And several of my black belts asked, well, who is that guy? I said, well, that's Frank Trejo. And they said, how come they all move differently and he moves like we do? Well, that was one of the greatest compliments they could have paid me, whether they knew it or not. Frank was unique in his power, focus, form, and delivery. He's no longer with us. He passed away from a combination of things, not the least of which was diabetes, and unfortunately we had to watch him taken apart. But at this particular time, on this Christmas, I want to wish him a happy birthday and ask everybody to stop and just give pause for a moment and remember the great Frank Trejo.
Hi, everyone. This is Joe Rebelo, known to many of you on the internet and martial arts world as Kenpo Joe. And today I'm here to talk about one of my instructors, a man who definitely inspired me through his actions and his efforts and his study in Kenpo, and that has to be Frank Trejo. I first met Frank Trejo at the Chicago Conclave held at Leeward Lakes Dragonwind Kempo in 1985. He was one of the 5 featured masters along with Joe Palazzo, Richard Huk Planas, of course Mr. Parker, and actually I should say 4, but there were many more people than that were there. Again, Leeward Lake himself, of course, and just numerous luminaries and individual Kempo, but I got to meet Frank Trejo. And I was familiar with Frank through the magazines and his wonderful tournament ability. And that year, 1985, there was a 3-part article done in Karate Illustrated with Mr. Parker working with Frank on the cover and throughout the article. So it's really great finally getting to meet Frank Trejo. So after we're meeting him there, the next time I worked with him, unfortunately, Mr. Parker tragically passed away in 1990, and I was testing for my 3rd degree black belt at Revere Karate Academy, Doreen Cogliandro's studio at that time, and with several individuals such as Leo Lacerte, Lance Soares, and I got to test in front of Mr. Trejo. And they put him in this big, comfortable, chair. Excuse me. And Frank, unfortunately, he had a little bit of jet lag and whatnot, so he was falling asleep in the chair. So every time I walked up, I dropped to a table, slap my thighs, boom, and wake Frank, and I'd demonstrate my form, and I'd finish my form, and I'd say under my breath, go back to sleep, Frank. As long as he saw me demonstrate, as long as he saw me work, that's all that mattered. I started taking seminars with Mr. Trejo, and over the years, got to work with him at the International Karate Championships when they were being held in Las Vegas, being run by Gilbert Velez. And when Mr. Trejo started his Kempo organization, the Frank Trejo Kempo Karate Association, I joined. I wanted to be involved. Many times, Mr. Trejo would take the time to demonstrate on me, and that meant a lot. And that, the feel is to believe. And I'll never forget Kempo sticky hands. Tick, tick, tick. Slap! Okay, learn that. Boom, 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 boom. Smack! Okay, learn that. And working on the flow of the sticky hands and the Kempo fusion of Frank Trejo. And I was very proud to be one of his member schools of the Frank Trejo Kempo Karate Association. I was very proud to have him come to New England for the World Martial Arts Federation. And it was really funny because for some reason, I don't know how they messed it up, but there was no one at the airport to pick him up. So I went down to go pick him up at the airport, and they didn't have a place for him to stay. So he ended up staying at my house. And that was the first time that Frank ever found out that I'm half Puerto Rican. It may not look it, but I'm half Portuguese and half Puerto Rican. So he got to meet my little alabaster-skinned Puerto Rican mother, which blew his mind when it said, "Mira, madre, it's Frank Trejo." Then he starts talking to him in Spanish. He's staring at her, and he's looking at me and he's going, "You're Latino?" I go, "Yeah, I'm half Puerto Rican." Try to tell you, you guys never believe it because you look at me and see this average white guy. But no, I'm so that really blew his mind. So he got to stay at my home and taught seminars. And then he did a tour of the tri-state area of New York, New Jersey, et cetera, and Delaware. And he asked me to come in and actually record all those seminars, which I did for him. And I'm hoping to release them in the near future. And, the joys of Frank Trejo. And he certified my 5th degree black belt, as well as recognizing my 8th degree through David German, through the Frank Trejo Kempo Karate Association. And I was very fortunate, and I wore the grayed out patch, and I, of course, the jumping kicking man, right? So lucky. So blessed to work with him, talk to him about techniques and whatnot. As a matter of fact, Frank Trejo was instrumental in getting me to get unlimited space on YouTube. A video that I had filmed at a camp that Steve Arsenault was running, and Mr. Trejo was adamant. He was like, "You show up, you film my seminar." I'm like, "Okay." So we went there and we took a clip and we put it on YouTube. Well, it got over 2,000 hits in a very short amount of time. So YouTube contacted me and said, due to the popularity of your video, you now have unlimited space on YouTube. Unlimited time that you can utilize, which was incredible. And I owe it all to Frank Trejo. There's certain phrases and certain things I'll never forget about Frank. You can't have known Frank Trejo and trained with Frank Trejo without hearing the phrase. See what I'm saying? I will never forget that phrase, and every once in a while I use it, and I go, "It's a Trejoism," and regaling me with many stories of his fighting days and different events, whether it be doing security with Van Halen and David Lee Roth, and knowing him in high school together, to being at a kickboxing card, and the lights went out and the place went up for grabs, and he woke up and he found out he had knocked out this girl that was trying to hit him with a chair. Hilarious stories. Just the nature of Frank Trejo. Just an incredible martial artist, a down-to-earth human being. I even got to spend New Year's with him one year. Christmas was the The silly guy from Massachusetts didn't know you couldn't get a hotel room around the holidays, especially New Year's with the Rose Parade. So ended up going to Frank Trejo's home and meeting his mom and meeting his family and eating Mexican food. He even got me to try tripe. I never tried tripe, but it was Mexican and it was spicy and I tried it. But so many wonderful memories. Training with Frank, learning from him, studying from him. Mr. Trejo, he's everywhere. There's everything. There's posters all over my studio of Frank Trejo. I miss you. I miss the legacy of the six-toed man, Frank Trejo.